Welcome back. Are you ready, guys, to hear more bad prediction that I made in the beginning of the season that turns out to be really wrong at the end of the year? Well, we are about to go through the Western Conference, and already when I look at where I put what I predict in terms of the standings, I can tell there were definitely some that I got it completely wrong. And the first one that I will say is the Portland Timbers, who I thought they were going to finish at the top of the Western Conference because I thought with how lethal their attack has shown in previous year, and then finally address their one of the main Achilles heel, which is their back line, by making some signings in the offseason. I thought they were ready to good to go to make some noise in the West. Well, it turns out that was not the case. I mean, they did eventually finish with a respectable fourth position, but there was no doubt that this team was battling throughout the season, and there was at a point where they were actually just in the playoff bubble, and that there was definitely some uncertainty early for this season from this Timbers team, and eventually they did figure things out and really started to go on a run. Though they kind of cooled off a little bit near the latter part of the season, and then kind of just opened the door for a team to potentially get that last home field position playoff spot. But in the end, they were able to hold on. Though, I talked about how this offseason they were supposed to address the defensive issue, and yeah, it is still there. I mean, when you look at their defense, is definitely one of the worst one in terms of all the defensive team. In fact, I think only RSL has the worst defense and the worst goal allowed than the Portland Timbers had. So certainly that's something that they needs to, of course, maybe address once again heading into next off season, or heading after their season is over. But there's no doubt that this team one of the big strength is the attack, and the attack will need to carry this team if they want to go deep into the playoffs. But now moving on to LAFC, and this is where we really get to the one that I got it completely wrong, because in the end LAFC would finish in ninth in the Western Conference, and there's no doubt that when I do that video where I talk about the most disappointing team of the season, LAFC is definitely going to be one of them, because this was supposed to be a team that was supposed to contend for MLS Cup, and this was supposed to be a team that really, this was kind of maybe the last chance, consider the fact that there's uncertainty about Carlos Vela and his future, and then we know that Diego Rossi eventually did moved on to Europe and go to Fenerbahce. So this was kind of the last hurrah for LAFC, and especially with that dynamic duel to really get this team to an MLS Cup, but it just never materialized, and a lot of that has to do with injuries, and that Carlos Vela was spending more time on the IR than actually on the pitch, and Rossi, of course, as I mentioned, eventually sold off in the summer. And while they definitely do have some good pieces, especially on the attack, where I think they finally found a replacement for Diamande, that is Chichorenko, the defense is still an issue for this team. I mean, the defense was the biggest Achilles heel, and time after time we've seen how that back line was relatively weak. And not to mention, there's also a stretch where, despite they have some very talented player on the team, they just could not put the ball in the back of net. They had problem in terms of finishing, and those kind of performance where they weren't able to get all 3 points eventually kind of got them in this hole, and they just never able to dig themselves out. But now moving on to the Seattle Sounders, who I predict to finish third this season, and God, I wish I should have predicted them to finish second, because like I said in the review, there's life, death, taxes, and basically the Sounders finished second. This is, I think, the 4th straight year that the Sounders have finished second in the Western Conference. And you know what I'm going to do next year when I do my prediction for the 2022 Western Conference season? I'm going to put the Seattle Sounders in second place. And I feel like I probably should have done it in the beginning of the year, just because, something tells me they're probably going to finish second. But part of me maybe didn't put them in second is because, with how, I know there was a lot of people that was doubting this team in the beginning of the season, and with the changes that this team was going through, a lot of people thought that they weren't even going to make the top 4, and they finally will have that regression year. No, they turns out to be one of the best team in the league throughout the entire part of the season. I mean, they did suffer some hiccups down the stretch to eventually finish second in the league, but there's no doubt that this is still one of the strongest team in the league. And when they do get healthy, which right now they are battling some injuries, especially on the attack. I heard both Ruidiaz and Ladero still recovering from some injury. But once they do get back and once they are at the strongest, this team is definitely going to make a deep playoff run. And like I said, you will never doubt the Seattle Sounder and Brian Schmitzer when they get into playoff time. Then I predict Minnesota was going to finish 4th in the Western Conference, and in the end they finished 5th, though they had a chance to finish 4th. I mean, down the stretch, the door was open for them to finish 4th in the Western Conference, but that draw against LAFC really hurts. Like that was really the one that I think if Minnesota was miss a big opportunity to get that home field advantage, that was the game, because they absolutely dominated that game against LAFC. And I remember how frustrated I was seeing the team dominate the game, and then literally the first shot that they allow, it was LAFC scoring the goal, and it wasn't even a great goal too, because Miller just simply dropped it, and it was just a goalkeeping howler, which almost just kind of symbolized how that is a very typical Minnesota sports kind of tradition, where you think that they're doing very well, and then all of a sudden you get sucker punch for something that you don't think should happen. And by the way, ever since that howler that Miller commit, he has not looked like the same goalkeeper. He has looked really shaky down the line. And I talked about before how I had concern with the attack, where this is still one of the team I think is the lowest goal scoring team out of all the playoff teams. But I think my concern now I have is a little bit maybe on the defensive end, because there's time where they haven't been very solid, and especially Tyler Miller really not looked like the Tyler Miller that we saw in the beginning of the season. And when you don't have good solid goalkeeping in the playoffs, yeah, that is definitely going to bite you. And again, that's why I don't have confidence with this team heading into the playoffs. But at least they made it to the playoffs. I mean, they could have easily finished eighth place if the Galaxy would have scored that late goal in decision day. They would have missed the playoffs entirely, and I would once again got this prediction completely wrong again. But in the end, I'm just happy that they were able to make it to the playoffs, and at least I'm kind of happy that I was kind of right with that. I was only one place off of that. I mean, the last two prediction, I of course got it relatively close, but the next one is the one that I got it wrong, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people got this wrong, because nobody saw this one coming, where they saw the Colorado Rapids finish top of the West. And like I said, that was the only time this season they have ever been at the top of the Western Conference, and really the only time in their franchise history to ever be at the top of the Western Conference. It just happened to be the last day of the season. And yeah, I mean, this Rapids team, what can you say about this Rapids team that hasn't said before, and the job that both Robin Fraser and how this front office has built a squad that this squad doesn't really have some notable names, but it's a very hard-working squad that always find ways to get wins in the end. When you face those kind of team in the playoffs, where there's multiple guys can hurt you, and they always find a way to win in the end, that's a very dangerous team to face. And I think after that game against LAFC, they also kind of sent a message to the rest of the league that, for those that are still doubting the Rapids, because of the fact that maybe some said that they haven't had a lot of wins against decent opponents. Well, I know LAFC wasn't really a decent opponent considering where they are in the standings, but it's still a decent opponent in terms of the fact that they have a lot of talent in that team, and that team was fighting for playoff position, and they just absolutely smacked them apart in that game. And not to mention the fact that for the rest of the playoffs, they're going to be playing at home. And keep in mind, this team have not lost a home game ever since they lost to Austin on opening weekend. So, Dick's Sporting Goods Park, it's started to become a fortress once again. And, now in really a way where it's going to be tough for teams to have to go to Colorado, and especially go to that altitude to trying to battle this hard-working Rapids team. But now moving on to Sporting KC, and this is another one that I kind of got it wrong. And in the end, I thought Sporting KC was going to have a bit of a step back, knowing the fact that, I still thought that last season was kind of a fluke, but they proved me this year that last season wasn't really a fluke, that they finished at the top of the Western Conference, and in some way, they should have finished at the top of the Western Conference if it wasn't for some injuries that has a lot to do with the fact that Peter Vermes decided to not make subs, which is kind of very typical of Peter Vermes, and eventually run the team onto the ground. And oh, by the way, I didn't mention this in my review. Yes, I know what happened in that game, and especially late before that goal was scored by RSL, that there was a very controversial handball that probably should have been given, and that should have been the one that Sporting KC would have won and would have got top spot in the Western Conference. And all I'll say is that I'm not surprised that has happened, because we've seen this before with Pro down the stretch, that there's going to be something that's going to cost the team. And at the end of the day, I know SKC fans are going to be very upset about that, but I will argue the fact that, yes, as upset as that is, probably you shouldn't have decided to just switch off in the last minute, and probably maybe you shouldn't just your head coach probably shouldn't have just decided to kind of contradict himself, where he hated Pro for that call, and then he basically said nothing about the one that Tim Melia decided to do a WWE move on Christian Roldan, and also also Amadou Dia trying to kill Reynoso, which is sub challenge. So yeah, I mean, I understand you're frustrated, Peter Vermees, but where was that moment when your team was on the benefit of the call? I mean, it has to work both ways, basically. But what I'm trying to say is that for Sporting KC, as frustrating it is to end the season like that, they just better hope that most of their guys are going to be coming back from injury and healthy in time for playoffs. Because when they do have a healthy squad, I think this is a team that could really challenge Seattle for that spot. But that is if they could get those players back healthy. Because if they don't, then that could be a bit of an issue. And then in 7th place, I thought the San Jose Earthquakes was going to finish that spot. And, I mean, this is one of the rare times that I did try to show some optimism for the Quakes. And, I know some people might criticize me of being a very pessimistic Quakes fan and how I always be a little bit too negative with this team. But in the end, in some ways, it's kind of just proven that this is the reason why I don't have pessimism or a lot of optimism for the Quakes, and more with pessimism, because in the end, in the season where I thought they were going to make a step up and make it to the playoffs for the second year in a row and grow on the playoff appearance last season, they once again gone backwards and finished 10th in the West, and they missed the playoffs as a result of that. And now the Quakes are pretty much now embarked in a new era once again, because Wando is no longer gonna play for this team after he announced his retirement, and also with the way that they've just announced Chris Leach as the new GM after him being the interim GM for a bit. It is truly once again a new era that the Quakes are embarking. As much as I know it's excited to see the Quakes are embarking on a new era, and that some people might give some optimism that good things are going to happen, I'm still going to try not to be too optimistic. And in fact, I'm kind of just still going to downplay it, because again, this season proves once again, and I hate the fact that they keep proving me this right, that you just cannot have optimism with this franchise. Like, this franchise has been stuck in this hamster wheel of mediocrity and just barely making it to the playoffs every single year. And unless if there is going to be a season where they maybe have finally shown that they have moved past that and just not live in that glory of the 2012 season, again, I just don't have a lot of optimism, and I'm just going to once again keep my bar very low on this team heading into next season. But now moving on to the next team, which is FC Dallas. And again, I said this in the preview, and I'll say it again. You remember how I said that last game of the season between the Quakes and FC Dallas can be a potential playoff matchup, and that the reason why I put the Quakes at top over Dallas is because they will beat Dallas to make it into the playoffs. Well, that didn't quite turn out well, because not only the fact that the Quakes underachieved once again, the same goes for FC Dallas. I mean, it's been a miserable season for FC Dallas, which from the get-go, it was miserable. Like, they got themselves into a deep hole, was dead last for majority of the year, and eventually they did start to figure things out, but then it just kind of got... they were just kind of like in a very mediocre kind of run, and when you're on a mediocre run after you got off to a bad start to the season, there's no way you can get yourself back into playoff position. So, yeah, this is a team that I think eventually you start to see that the bad signings that they have made, besides getting some of these academy players from their talented homegrown pipeline, it started to take a toll on this team. And again, there's a lot that needs to change with this team, and it all starts with them hiring a new head coach after they decided to let go Luchi Gonzalez this season. But now, moving on to the other Texas team, Austin FC. And, I had optimism this season that Austin was going to do well. And again, I know in the end, they did finish 12th. And you might not think that that's a good start to their expansion year. But again, they showed some promise this season. And especially, I think, when you look at the second half of the season, they actually look like a respectable team and look like almost an MLS team that is almost ready to take that next step of making the playoffs. And the reason why they finished so low in the table is because for the first half of the season they just had a lot of trouble to try to figure things out, and especially the biggest problem they just had is they just could not score goals. But once they started to kind of figure that out and start getting some home wins, you can see that this team definitely has some talent, and that I believe this team is going to be much better than they are after this season. And in some way, it's a good start for this team. Even when you look at the amount of points that they got, which is not a lot, it is still considered better than compared to, let's say, what happened with FC Cincinnati in their first year existing. And at least with Austin, the other thing that's good is that at least they have some hope in the second year, because that's something that FC Cincinnati and certainly Inter Miami, the last couple of expansion teams, never got to say when they head into their first year. But now I picked the Vancouver Whitecaps to finish 10th place, and I thought this season I kind of was thinking about putting the Whitecaps in the playoffs because I feel like they were going to make the jump. And for the majority of the year, it didn't look like that was going to happen. Like, it was miserable for the Whitecaps under Mark Dos Santos. But then something clicked in the latter part of the season, and they went on that 10-game unbeaten streak. And then, they inexplicably decided to fire Mark Dos Santos, saying that all that winning was just really just kind of a false indication of where they are. And then they hired Vanni Sartini, and then they started to win a lot of games and end up finished 6th in the Western Conference. And I mean, this is just, and it's weird that when you look at this team, I mean, as much as the deep rebuild that they've been going through the last couple of years, some of these players that has been impact player for this team wasn't really just part of the deep rebuild. Like guys like Brian White, who they bought from the Red Bulls in the summer transfer window, I didn't think they were going to get him during the deep rebuild, but when they got him, I did say that is going to be an impact signing, because I know Brian White is a guy that is very underrated, and that I feel like the Red Bulls shouldn't have let him go, and they probably regret now letting him go, knowing the fact that he is lighting it up once again for the Whitecaps. And then of course them finally making that DP player that I've said that was kind of the missing piece. And right now, Ryan Gaul is definitely looking like the real deal for this team. And then combined with the way that even some of the deep rebuild that they go through, and some of the players that they signed before, like Dahome, has really had a great season. And then the back line definitely have probably the best season that we seen with this team. And when you combine all that, they're now in 6th position in the Western Conference, and really are heading into the playoffs hot. And when you head into the playoff hot, you can definitely make some noise, even if you're a lower seed. And like I said, this is why I think the Whitecaps is going to be a dark horse team. And this is also why, if you're Sporting KC, you are really concerned the fact that you have to get some of your best player back if you're going to have to face a red hot Whitecaps team. And then in 11th place, I thought the Galaxy was going to finish in that spot, and it turns out they finished in 8th place, which, if you tell a Galaxy fan, it will be a disappointing season, because they spent most of the time pretty much in the playoff position. Well, not just most, all season long they were in a playoff position, and they literally fell out below the red line on the very, very final day. And again, the reason why I kind of predict the Galaxy very low isn't just because I hate the Galaxy. It's mainly because I think, with Greg Vanny taking control of that team, I think that he still need time to, of course, get this team to be decent. And you can definitely see that. I think in the beginning, it was quite amazing of what he has transferred to this Galaxy team. And in some way, there were times where they started to look like the Galaxy that we know of, and the Galaxy that we seen in the Bruce Arena era that pretty much dominate the league. But then, yeah, that's when it feels like maybe it's in the second half of the season, reality smacked in their faces, and that it seems like they're definitely not ready yet for that big time. And that there's no doubt that I think this offseason the Galaxy are going to have a lot of make some changes and hope that they allow Greg Vanny to, of course, sign the players that he needs. Because I think in the end, as much as I know Galaxy fans are very upset about what happened at the end of the year, the bottom line is they weren't ready. Like I feel like they really overachieved with how they play in the first half of the season, especially the fact that they were heavily rely on Chicharito as the player to, of course, score goals. And it's unsurprising that when Chicharito basically got injured in the middle of the season, they started to have problems in terms of scoring, and the goals started to kind of dry up a little bit, and they gone through that incredible bad run in the second half of the season. So I guess maybe you can even say that in some way Chicharito was the only reason why this team really kind of finds some relevance, and that once he wasn't available, this team started to fall apart. And it just kind of also shows you how much this team needs some more squad depth, and especially another attacker on this team to support Chicharito. And also, not to mention the fact that they need to fix that back line. I mean, this is what I know it's almost like a tradition for me to say that the Galaxy need to fix the back line in the offseason, and it's still kind of mind-boggling the fact that this is now 5 years in of me saying this, and yet I'm still saying this 5 years in, and I'm pretty sure Galaxy fans are probably frustrated seeing this, because why is in the world can their team not able to sign a competent back line when you see the rest of the league they have figured it out, and it's been now 5 years and they still have not figured out, and still give up some of the most boneheaded goals that we've seen them can see in the league this season. And then finally, well, actually not finally, we're now into 12th place, which I said the Houston Dynamo was going to finish 12th, and they weren't that far off. And I think this is probably the only one, besides maybe the one with Seattle, where I kind of say that I didn't believe that they were going to have a big fall off, even though I did move them down to third. That I actually kind of got this one correct. But in terms of standing wise, I think on the final day the Dynamo did drop to the, well, actually no, on the final week they did drop to the bottom of the Western Conference. And I did say that this was kind of like a rebuilding year for the Dynamo, even though it technically wasn't. It was just them kind of maybe putting some placeholder and hope that thing worth a shot to maybe surprise everybody. And no, they didn't surprise anybody. They had that horrendous run in the middle of the season, and I truly think that it is time for this team to rebuild. And I think with them bringing a new GM and Pat Onstad, that will be the beginning step of this rebuild. And I know next season it's probably not going to be better for this team when they start this deep rebuild, but I hope eventually they admit that, yeah, they need to stop just using these placeholder and just keep signing players thinking that they can make one last hurrah and delay the inevitable. This team need a deep rebuild from a couple years ago, and I feel like, again, they're going to do it starting into next season. And it's unsurprising the fact that they did not do well this year or what. But now moving on into the last team, and it's only fitting for me to talk about terrible prediction I made in the beginning of the season and finish off with one that I also got it completely wrong. And I predicted RSL to finish last in the standings, and a lot of people probably predicted the same thing, knowing the fact that there's so much chaos with RSL, and they're still in the recovery of the whole Deloy Hansen situation, and that they're a team that basically is owned by MLS, and the league basically has the saying of what they can sign and what they can't do. And with that situation, it was always going to be tough for a team, but yet somehow in some way they finished in 7th place and made it to the playoffs literally in the last second of the game that they play, and probably one of the most dramatic way to make it to the playoffs since the Quakes did it back in 2017. And yeah, I mean, it's just remarkable what RSL has done. And in some way RSL, I talked about in the preseason that RSL and Montreal, for me, these two teams have something familiar where there's a lot of question coming in, and I just don't think that with so much question you can really predict them to finish anything near the bottom. But both of these teams have kind of proven that just because they have a lot of question heading into the season doesn't mean they're going to have some surprise package. And there was definitely a lot of surprise in this team. I mean, who would have thought that Rubio Rubin would be a guy that would be a lethal goal scorer, and a guy that we probably have never heard of in the beginning of the season, lighting up the league. You know, who would have thought that Damir Kreilach? Well, I think I knew this was kind of coming, where after a difficult season that Kreilach has been just the MVP of this team this season. And then the same goes with Albert Rusnak, really having a great season this year. And what's also kind of surprising with this RSL team is I thought they were going to miss the playoffs, and they were going to choke at the end with some of the resort that they had. But like I said, that big resort that they had at the end, especially the resiliency that they've been showing throughout this season. Them I think they lead the league in terms of the most goals scored past the 80-minute mark. It just shows you that nothing breaks this team. Like this team, no matter what kind of adversity that they face, and no matter, even if they don't have an owner, and then also losing their head coach at the midpoint of the season, when their head coach decided to jump ship and go to the Seattle Sounders as an assistant, it just shows you that this team has a really strong mentality, and that when you have a strong mentality heading into the playoffs, and if you believe in a quote to their famous goal song and their famous chant, this team can be another team that I think could be dangerous and can really challenge the Seattle Sounders in the playoffs. I mean, I know a lot of people will pick the Sounders, and for me, I still would pick the Sounders over RSL. But I'll be damn that game is gonna be a blowout. I think RSL is gonna really make Seattle sweat in that game, and really will make them to win that playoff game and put up a heck of a fight. Kind of similar to what I envisioned FC Dallas did I think 2 years ago. Remember when FC Dallas, nobody believed that they were going to do much, and they put up a really good fight against the Sounders, ultimately falling at the end. I envision that's going to be the same thing with RSL. I think they're going to put a heck of a test against the Sounders, and they're not going to be a pushover when they face them in the playoffs. But either way, that is pretty much it for my reaction in terms of the prediction I made in the beginning of the season. And I think this might be the first time ever, but I actually got none of them right. Yeah, I mean, in some way, I think that's even more impressive, the fact that I got none of it correct. But it just also shows me how bad I made in terms of the prediction, and how, you know, I might say that me making bad prediction and me saying in the beginning of the year, don't take this prediction seriously, because it's usually kind of bad, and I use it as kind of a joke. But this season, it was not a joke. I mean, I got a lot of these wrong, and you know this is why in MLS this league is so unpredictable, because just as you thought that you know everything about this league, and you know how each team is gonna do, there's gonna be some surprises that's gonna throw you away. And I think this season there was definitely more surprises that I've seen in previous season, and that, yeah, you know, sometimes I don't mind getting it wrong in this. I love the fact that there's surprises, and there's some feel good story, which we had plenty of it. In fact, I kind of like it more than actually just kind of the plain old story, where you know that team is expected to be good, and they actually did very well this season. But nevertheless, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys, if you like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and let me know in the comments your prediction that you made in the beginning of this season, and let me know how many you got wrong. Did you get every single one wrong like I did in the beginning of the year? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.